The sky above Poland burned with fire and smoke, tracer rounds cutting through the morning mist as German Stukas dived relentlessly on unsuspecting towns. For the young pilots of the Polish Air Force, the invasion of September 1, 1939, was not an abstract war report. It was immediate, brutal, and personal. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outflanked, yet they refused to yield. In a country caught between two great powers, each sortie carried not only the weight of duty but the desperate hope of defending a homeland that teetered on the edge of annihilation. In those first terrifying days, Polish pilots faced the impossible, fighting a modern Luftwaffe with antiquated aircraft, navigating a rapidly collapsing command structure, and witnessing the destruction of the cities and villages they had sworn to protect. Even as Warsaw fell and the front lines crumbled, their resolve remained unbroken. They knew that if Poland were lost, the fight was far from over. The war would follow them wherever they could take the fight next. As bombs rained from the sky and anti-aircraft guns shook the earth, pilots in the Polish Air Force displayed a mixture of audacity and precision that surprised even seasoned German observers. The PZLP.11 fighters, outdated compared to the sleek Messerschmitts of the Luftwaffe, became instruments of sheer courage. Pilots executed tight maneuvers, weaving between explosions, their eyes scanning for enemy aircraft while mentally calculating odds that seemed hopeless. Every engagement, every evasive maneuver, every strafing run over retreating convoys carried the weight of survival and patriotism intertwined. They lost comrades daily, yet the drive to fight, to stay airborne, to disrupt the enemy, remained relentless. These men knew that surrender was not an option, not because of orders from a distant high command, but because their very existence, their country's future, depended on their defiance. By mid-September, the situation grew untenable. Poland was encircled, and the Soviet invasion from the east compounded the crisis. Commanders faced impossible decisions: continue a doomed defense, risk capture, or retreat to continue the fight elsewhere. Many pilots, their spirits unbroken despite exhaustion and grief, chose the perilous path of escape. They navigated to neighboring Romania, crossing borders under the cover of darkness, dodging both enemy patrols and political uncertainty. The journey was fraught with danger. Roads were littered with retreating civilians, wrecked tanks, and the remnants of artillery emplacements. Each mile brought a mix of relief and anxiety, a reminder that safety was fleeting and the war had no respect for national boundaries. Once in Romania, Polish pilots confronted a new reality: they were exiles, soldiers without a country, and yet still bound by duty. Transit through Romania required negotiation with local authorities and a delicate balancing act to avoid internment. Many spent weeks in improvised camps, repairing aircraft, gathering intelligence, and waiting for opportunities to continue the fight. Their determination to reach France, where they could join forces with other Allied units, drove them onward. Letters home, smuggled through clandestine channels, spoke of resilience and longing, an emotional tether to the land and people left behind, even as each pilot understood that the war would demand sacrifices far beyond what they had imagined. In France, the Polish pilots found both hope and new challenges. The French Air Force welcomed them, recognizing their skill and experience, but the integration process was complicated. Language barriers, differences in tactics, and the need to adapt to unfamiliar aircraft tested the pilots' adaptability. Yet these men, hardened by the rapid and devastating loss of their homeland, adjusted quickly. They learned to fly French aircraft such as the Marine Saulnier Ms 406 and the WWII D.520, studying new maneuvers while mentally preparing for the battles they knew were inevitable. Training was intense, often conducted under the shadow of imminent German invasion, and every sortie carried the dual purpose of protecting France and preserving the possibility of future resistance. The fall of France in June 1940 brought a fresh wave of despair, but Polish pilots refused to surrender to hopelessness. As the French lines collapsed, evacuation became a race against time. Many pilots boarded ships to Britain, navigating minefields, Luftwaffe patrols, and stormy seas. Their arrival on English soil marked both relief and the beginning of a new struggle, proving their worth to a foreign air force while retaining their identity and determination. Despite the initial skepticism of some RAF officers, who questioned language skills and operational discipline, Polish pilots carried with them not just technical expertise but an unshakable spirit forged in the fire of Poland's destruction. Their combat experience, honed under impossible conditions, would soon make them indispensable in a battle that threatened the very survival of Britain itself. The psychological burden they carried was immense. Each pilot had witnessed the obliteration of their cities, the displacement of millions, and the deaths of friends and family. Many had survived impossible odds, only to find themselves far from home in a strange country, facing new bureaucratic hurdles and cultural challenges. Yet within this adversity, they found a renewed purpose. The war was no longer about defending a single territory, it had become a moral and strategic fight against tyranny. Each dogfight over the English Channel, each interception of a Luftwaffe raid, became a statement of resilience and defiance, a refusal to let the forces that had destroyed their homeland dictate the course of Europe. In these early months, the camaraderie among Polish pilots became a lifeline. They relied on each other not just for operational coordination but for emotional support, sharing stories of survival, hope, and grief. These bonds would become legendary, providing both tactical advantage and moral fortitude. The young men who had flown in desperate sorties over Polish towns now trained together over the English countryside, preparing for the moment when they could once again challenge the German Luftwaffe in full. Their determination to avenge Poland and protect their new host nation infused them with a courage that would soon astonish the British and change the course of aerial warfare. Thus, by the summer of 1940, the stage was set. Polish pilots, battle-hardened, determined, and carrying the weight of a lost homeland, stood ready to take to the skies once more. The fall of Poland had not broken them, it had forged a generation of airmen whose skill, audacity, and resilience would prove critical in one of the most decisive aerial battles in history. They were no longer just pilots, they were symbols of defiance, the embodiment of a nation that refused to vanish quietly from the map, and soon they would etch their names into the annals of the Battle of Britain, altering both the perception and outcome of a conflict that would decide the fate of Europe. Britain awaits arrival, adaptation, and first skirmishes. The grey waters of the English Channel had never seemed so formidable. For the Polish pilots who had escaped France, every mile across storm-tossed waves carried the weight of uncertainty. They had left behind a homeland overrun by Nazis, narrowly escaped capture, and endured the chaos of collapsing air forces. Now, stepping onto British soil in the summer of 1940, they faced a new challenge, proving themselves in a foreign air force while preparing to confront the Luftwaffe, an enemy they already knew all too well. Their arrival in Britain was not greeted with immediate fanfare. While the RAF recognized the value of experienced pilots, skepticism ran high. Could these men, speaking a language most could barely understand and trained on different aircraft, adapt quickly enough to Britain's defensive needs? The Poles, however, carried a determination that transcended bureaucratic doubts. They were veterans of defeat and exile, and their resolve had hardened in the fires of loss. Initial integration into the RAF was a mixture of opportunity and trial. Polish pilots were assigned to various training bases, where they encountered a new set of aircraft Hurricanes and Spitfires that differed in handling, speed, and armament from the planes they had flown in Poland and France. Training schedules were relentless. From dawn until dusk, they studied the manuals, practiced maneuvers, and conducted simulated dogfights, often with instructors who were impatient with the language barrier. Misunderstandings in communication were common, and yet the Poles' aptitude quickly became evident. Experienced in combat, they adapted to new tactics and aircraft with a speed that surprised many British instructors. Their familiarity with evasive maneuvers, gunnery, and aerial strategy allowed them to contribute insights to RAF operations even during training, bridging gaps between theory and real-world combat experience. Life in Britain was not limited to the airfields. Pilots lived in barracks alongside British colleagues, navigating differences in culture, habits, and humor. Some officers doubted their discipline, while others underestimated their courage, but these assumptions were challenged daily. Shared duties, joint exercises, and the inevitable tensions of wartime life gradually built mutual respect. Polish pilots, accustomed to hardship and improvisation, adapted to rationing, cold nights, and endless drills with a stoicism born of necessity. Friendships blossomed in the mess halls, over cigarettes and shared stories, forming the social backbone that would sustain them in the air and in battle. Each pilot carried with him the memory of fallen comrades and bombed cities, and each day in Britain was both a respite and a reminder of why the fight was far from over. By late summer 1940, the Luftwaffe began its sustained campaign against Britain, known as the Battle of Britain. The RAF scrambled to reinforce its squadrons, and Polish pilots were assigned to operational units, ready to defend the skies. Their first missions tested not only their skill but also their adaptability to British tactics and coordination with radar control systems. Flying in formations alongside unfamiliar squadrons, they had to communicate in fractured English while maintaining precision under fire. These early sorties were a baptism by fire. Poles quickly proved themselves adept at spotting enemy aircraft, calculating attack runs, and executing evasive maneuvers. Their aggressiveness and willingness to press attacks often surprised both German pilots and their British commanders. Where caution might have prevailed, Polish pilots relied on experience, intuition, and sheer nerve to take decisive action. The story of the 303 Kosciuszko Squadron began in this crucible of urgency and skepticism. Composed entirely of Polish airmen, the squadron brought together men who had flown in Poland, escaped to France, and now were ready to take the fight to the Luftwaffe over Britain. Their first encounters with German bombers were a mix of chaos and precision. Flying Hurricanes, they attacked formations of Heinkel He-111s and Messerschmitt Bf-109s, coordinating attacks with a daring confidence that became their hallmark. In these early skirmishes, they shot down aircraft, protected vital airfields, and provided desperately needed support to exhausted British units. Their presence was not only a tactical advantage but also a morale boost, demonstrating that experienced fighters from other lands could operate effectively and decisively in the RAF. Yet, victories came at a cost. Polish pilots quickly learned the brutal calculus of aerial warfare over Britain. Many lost comrades to enemy fire, mechanical failure, or accidents during risky maneuvers. The emotional burden was compounded by the knowledge that their homeland remained under occupation. Each battle was fought with a dual sense of duty, to Britain, which offered them sanctuary and a platform to fight, and to Poland, which they had left behind but carried in memory and spirit. Letters to family and friends, when possible, were filled with hope and reassurances, but also with glimpses of fear, grief, and longing. Every mission above the English countryside was a struggle not only against German aircraft but also against the weight of displacement and the haunting loss of home. The adaptability of Polish pilots was further demonstrated in their innovative tactics. They often flew more aggressively than their British counterparts, taking calculated risks that yielded high rewards. Their willingness to engage in close combat, press attacks against larger enemy formations, and coordinate rapidly with wingmen made them both effective and, at times, intimidating allies. These actions began to dispel early prejudices among RAF commanders, who recognized that these exiled pilots were not only skilled but indispensable. Within weeks, the Polish squadrons earned a reputation for reliability, tenacity, and effectiveness that belied the initial skepticism about their integration. As September turned to October 1940, the rhythm of daily sorties, intense combat, and brief respites in the barracks became the new normal. Polish pilots learned to navigate the English weather, the foggy mornings, and the unpredictable winds, turning every disadvantage into an opportunity for tactical innovation. Their presence began to shape RAF strategies, with commanders increasingly relying on their experience to cover vulnerable sectors and lead attacks. Morale among British pilots was buoyed by the courage and skill of their Polish colleagues, and the bond forged in adversity strengthened the Allied air defense. By the time the Luftwaffe intensified its bombing campaign in late 1940, Polish pilots had become fully operational, skilled, and respected members of the RAF. Their early missions over Britain were not just a test of endurance or adaptation, they were a statement. These exiles, displaced by war yet undeterred, demonstrated that experience, determination, and courage transcended nationality and language. The skies above Britain, once a theater dominated by skepticism and uncertainty, now bore witness to the precision, audacity, and unwavering spirit of men who had already fought, lost, and survived. Their integration into the RAF was complete, and the stage was set for acts of heroism that would become legendary in the Battle of Britain. Courage in the skies, the Battle of Britain unfolds. The roar of aircraft engines filled the English skies, a relentless symphony of war as the Luftwaffe launched wave after wave of attacks on Britain's airfields, factories, and cities. For the Polish pilots who had recently arrived, the theoretical knowledge gained in training and early sorties was about to meet the raw, unforgiving reality of combat. It was no longer enough to fly precisely or follow orders. Survival, strategic impact, and quick thinking under fire would determine both personal fate and the course of the battle. The men of the 303 Kosciuszko Squadron and their fellow Polish units understood that every second above the clouds mattered. Each engagement was a duel of skill, nerve, and instinct, with the stakes measured not in points or medals, but in lives saved, territory defended, and the very survival of Britain itself. From the outset, Polish pilots approached combat with a mixture of ferocity and calculated risk. Experienced in dogfights over Poland and France, they were unafraid to press attacks against superior enemy formations. Hurricanes and Spitfires became extensions of their will, maneuvered with precision and daring. They learned quickly that the Luftwaffe relied on tight formations, coordinated bombing runs, and numerical superiority, but the Poles were equally adept at exploiting gaps, anticipating enemy movements, and coordinating with British wingmen despite language barriers. Each sortie became an intricate ballet of aerial strategy, with pilots weaving through enemy fire, calculating angles of attack, and maintaining situational awareness over vast stretches of sky. The human dimension of the battle was as intense as the technical skill required. Pilots faced constant fear, adrenaline, and fatigue, yet they had no choice but to maintain focus. The psychological burden of watching comrades fall, knowing reinforcements were limited, and realizing the destruction awaiting on the ground weighed heavily. Polish pilots, however, drew strength from shared experience and a sense of purpose. Their homeland had been overrun, their families imperiled, yet the skies above Britain offered an arena where courage could directly influence outcomes. In every dogfight, every interception, every dive to engage bombers, they carried not only their training but the hopes of a nation that no longer existed on maps yet lived vividly in their hearts. Among the stories that emerged during these weeks were acts of exceptional bravery that would become legendary. Pilots flying missions over southern England engaged formations of Heinkel He-111s escorted by Bf-109s with relentless precision. Some Polish airmen took on multiple enemy fighters simultaneously, drawing fire away from damaged British units or bombers carrying civilians below. Others executed daring head-on attacks, risking catastrophic collisions to disrupt the enemy's approach. Casualties were inevitable, but so were moments of ingenuity and courage that highlighted both skill and indomitable spirit. Every kill registered in the squadron's log was the result of split-second decisions, honed instincts, and nerves of steel. The 303 Squadron quickly earned a reputation that resonated throughout the RAF. Their aggressive style, precise gunnery, and tactical boldness made them formidable opponents. Within weeks, the squadron became the highest-scoring unit in the Battle of Britain, a remarkable achievement considering they had joined the fight later than many other squadrons. Their success was not merely numerical, it reshaped perceptions of foreign pilots in the RAF, challenging prejudices and skepticism. British commanders began to rely on Polish pilots for critical defensive missions, trusting them to engage enemy formations with minimal guidance and maximum effectiveness. Yet the battle was not solely about victories. Polish pilots endured extreme physical and mental strain. Sorties often lasted for hours, with limited fuel, unpredictable weather, and the constant threat of enemy fire. Pilots endured frostbite at high altitudes, dehydration during extended patrols, and exhaustion from consecutive missions. The emotional toll of watching comrades perish, sometimes in horrifying circumstances, was compounded by the knowledge that they had no immediate support network beyond their squadron. Each day demanded not just technical skill but psychological resilience, a capacity to push through fear and fatigue in service of a larger mission. The skies were also a stage for individual heroism. One pilot might dive through flak to disrupt a bomber formation, while another risked engine failure to protect a wingman under attack. Quick thinking and adaptability often determined survival, improvising evasive maneuvers, calculating return paths through radar zones, and maintaining formation discipline under chaos. These moments revealed the extraordinary training, instincts, and bravery that Polish pilots brought from previous conflicts. Every decision in midair carried consequences measured in seconds and meters, where hesitation could mean death and courage could tip the balance of a battle. Beyond the immediate skirmishes, the presence of Polish pilots had strategic implications. Their effectiveness allowed the RAF to stretch limited resources, defend critical sectors, and buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Their aggressive interception tactics disrupted Luftwaffe bombing runs, protecting infrastructure, civilian populations, and airfields crucial for sustained defense. Their impact was disproportionately large compared to their numbers. A handful of well-coordinated sorties could alter the outcome of raids that threatened entire regions. In this way, Polish pilots became not just participants but force multipliers, embodying the intersection of skill, courage, and strategic value. Camaraderie within squadrons was another essential factor. Pilots shared intelligence, advised each other on maneuvers, and offered emotional support amidst relentless danger. Letters to loved ones were rare but treasured, capturing fragments of hope and longing. Humor, storytelling, and ritualized routines helped maintain morale during downtime between sorties. The bonds forged in these circumstances were extraordinary, providing both tactical cohesion and psychological sustenance. Pilots relied on each other in life and death situations, and these connections often determined not just operational success but survival itself. As the weeks of August and September progressed, the Polish pilots' contribution became undeniable. Their integration into the RAF had been complete, and their reputation cemented through actions that combined skill, bravery, and resilience. They had transformed from skeptical newcomers to respected veterans whose presence altered both tactics and morale. The Battle of Britain was as much a test of endurance and spirit as of aircraft and technology, and Polish airmen exemplified both in extraordinary measure. Their victories were not only tactical but symbolic. Each enemy aircraft downed, each mission survived, reinforced the narrative that courage and commitment could overcome adversity, even in exile. By the end of the battle, the legacy of these pilots was clear. They had flown more sorties, scored more kills, and displayed greater initiative than many expected from foreign recruits. Yet the human cost was high. Survivors carried physical injuries, psychological scars, and the haunting memory of comrades lost. Their heroism, largely unrecognized in the broader narrative at the time, laid the foundation for post-war acknowledgement and remembrance. The Polish pilots of the Battle of Britain had not only defended a nation under siege but had proven the extraordinary capacity of skill, courage, and perseverance to transcend borders, exile, and despair. Beyond the battle, legacy, recognition, and the cost of courage. The roar of engines had faded, the skies over southern England cleared of Luftwaffe bombers, and the momentary victory of the Battle of Britain was celebrated in newspapers, radio broadcasts, and the hearts of civilians. Yet for the Polish pilots who had fought so fiercely, the end of the aerial campaign did not signal rest or return. Their war continued, not only in missions over occupied Europe but also in the struggle to secure recognition, navigate political uncertainty, and come to terms with the profound costs of combat and exile. The Battle of Britain had immortalized their courage, but the path ahead was fraught with new challenges, some immediate, others that would span decades. In the months following the battle, Polish pilots continued to fly with distinction. They were integrated into offensive operations, escorting bombing raids over France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, targeting German supply lines, airfields, and industrial centers. These missions demanded a different skill set than defensive sorties over England. They required long-range navigation, precision targeting under anti-aircraft fire, and adaptability in the face of unfamiliar terrain. Pilots relied on instincts honed during the chaos of Poland's invasion and the defensive urgency of Britain's skies. Their experience allowed them to anticipate enemy maneuvers, execute complex coordinated attacks, and respond to rapidly changing conditions with split-second decisions. In these sorties, they demonstrated not only technical expertise but the psychological resilience needed to confront the trauma of repeated combat, loss of comrades, and the constant awareness that the homeland they had left remained under enemy control. However, life in exile brought profound personal challenges. Many Polish pilots were separated from families, some of whom had been captured or killed, others displaced across Europe. The letters they received were sporadic, censored, or delayed by months, leaving them in constant uncertainty. Homesickness mingled with survivors' guilt, as they grappled with the realization that their fight for freedom had taken them far from loved ones who could not participate in the struggle. Within RAF bases, camaraderie offered solace, yet no bond could fully replace the presence of family. Despite this, pilots continued to fly, driven by an understanding that their contributions were pivotal to the Allied war effort and, ultimately, to the hope of liberating Poland itself. Recognition, both during and after the war, remained complicated. British authorities respected the skill and bravery of Polish pilots, yet their presence often remained a footnote in official reports. Decorations such as the Distinguished Flying Cross were awarded, but media coverage and historical accounts initially highlighted British squadrons. This lack of acknowledgement was compounded after the war by geopolitical realities. With Poland falling under Soviet influence, many exiled pilots could not return home. They faced difficult decisions: settle permanently in Britain, emigrate elsewhere, or continue military service with the hope that circumstances might eventually allow a return. Their personal sacrifices were immense, including the loss of homeland, interrupted careers, and the burden of living as citizens without a country. Despite these challenges, the influence of Polish pilots persisted. They helped train new RAF recruits, sharing combat experience and tactical knowledge that improved the effectiveness of both British and Allied air operations. Their assertiveness in the air and professionalism on the ground set standards that enhanced squadron cohesion and performance. Younger pilots looked to them as mentors, absorbing lessons not only in flying techniques but also in resilience, decision-making under pressure, and the importance of unity in adversity. In this way, the Polish airmen's legacy extended beyond immediate wartime victories, shaping the RAF and Allied operations in ways that were tangible and enduring. The end of the war brought a bittersweet reality. While Germany was defeated and Europe liberated, Poland remained behind the Iron Curtain. Many pilots who had fought valiantly for freedom were unable to return home, forced instead to build new lives in Britain, Canada, the United States, and other countries. Communities of exiled veterans formed, maintaining Polish culture, language, and military traditions in foreign lands. These networks became vital sources of identity, solidarity, and historical preservation, ensuring that the stories of heroism and sacrifice were not lost. Memorials, associations, and commemorative events gradually emerged, highlighting contributions that had been overlooked in mainstream narratives for decades. The Battle of Britain, once celebrated primarily as a British triumph, increasingly recognized the indispensable role of Polish pilots whose courage had tipped the balance in critical moments. The personal cost for these men was profound. Many carried physical injuries sustained in combat, while others bore psychological scars from months of relentless sorties, witnessing death, and living under constant threat. The transition from wartime urgency to peacetime existence was disorienting and often painful. Ex-combatants had to navigate civilian life without the structure, purpose, and camaraderie that had defined their wartime experience. Some struggled to find employment, while others leveraged technical skills acquired in the Air Force for careers in aviation, engineering, or instruction. Yet even in these post-war endeavors, the shadow of the skies remained, shaping decisions, values, and sense of identity. The legacy of the Polish pilots of the Battle of Britain is multifaceted. On a tactical level, their skill, audacity, and combat effectiveness directly contributed to the RAF's defensive success and altered the strategic landscape of the war. On a human level, they embodied resilience in the face of exile, loss, and adversity. On a symbolic level, they became living reminders that courage knows no borders and that commitment to a just cause can persist despite displacement and political marginalization. Over time, historians, authors, and public commemorations have increasingly highlighted their achievements, ensuring that their story is no longer a mere footnote but a celebrated chapter in both Polish and global military history. The memorials erected in Britain, the preserved aircraft, and the ceremonies honoring veterans serve as tangible evidence of this enduring legacy. Yet perhaps the most profound tribute lies in the continued study and recognition of their service. Schools, museums, and media productions now recount the exploits of the Polish squadrons, ensuring that new generations understand the extraordinary circumstances under which these pilots operated, and the sacrifices they made to defend a land that had become both refuge and battlefield. Their courage transcends the particulars of geography and politics, standing as a testament to the power of determination, skill, and honor under fire. In reflecting on the trajectory of these men from the skies over Poland, through harrowing escapes and integration into a foreign air force, to the high-stakes dogfights over Britain and beyond, it becomes clear that their story is not only one of military achievement but also of human endurance. They navigated the most extreme trials of war and exile with resilience, resourcefulness, and unwavering dedication. Though decades passed before their contributions were fully acknowledged, the Polish pilots of the Battle of Britain left an indelible mark on history. Their courage saved lives, inspired allies, and reshaped the narrative of resistance and resilience in one of the most pivotal conflicts of the 20th century. Ultimately, their story is a testament to the enduring human spirit. It reminds us that heroism is not confined to a single nation, language, or uniform, but exists wherever skill, courage, and unwavering commitment to a just cause meet adversity. The Polish pilots of the Battle of Britain proved that even in exile, even in the darkest skies, the flame of determination can illuminate the path to victory, honor, and lasting legacy.